I'd like to call the December 2022 Airport Commission to order. Mark, can you please do a roll call and let us know who's here?
Sure. I'm filling in today for Brian Gatta, who is off this week, so he asked me to fill in for him. Michelle Bond.
Here.
Luke Fassard. I thought I saw Luke earlier.
I did. It's either that or the Hulk.
Oh, I do see him present. I just don't hear him. But let's say he's present.
Okay.
John Halleck is present. Alder Hanairo.
Here.
David Lorman.
Here.
Kevin Munson.
Here.
Brian Shaw.
Here.
Recording in progress.
Okay.
Did we get a response from Michelle Bond?
Yes, we did.
We did. I just don't see where she. Oh, there she is. Okay.
Yeah.
I think we have everyone present.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. Okay, next item is the proof of posting and notices.
Posted at the front of City Hall through our listserv, and I see that Rich is nodding that it's posted at the airport.
Affirmative.
All right, thank you so much. Next item is the approval of the November 3rd minutes. I'll give everybody a chance to take a peek at the minutes. If anyone has any corrections they'd like to offer up or make a motion for the commission to entertain, we'll stand by.
Mr. Chair,
Yes,
I have a correction to make.
yes,
It's on, well, goodness, it's page 3 of 4, I guess, of the minutes. And it's in just before item number 4. It says Hanairo offered the following suggestions. I didn't actually offer suggestion number 5 about if the vehicle is sold in the future. That was something that you, Mr. Chair, mentioned. But you didn't mention it in the context of whether the funds would go to the city or the airport enterprise fund.
okay, so
That came up in the council meeting, so I would just suggest,
we'll take that out.
yeah, taking that out.
Let's just stop at the end of to help purchase the vehicle, period.
Yep.
And then we'll remove the rest. I don't have any objection to that. Does anybody else? Okay, hearing no objections, let's go ahead and remove that. With that change, would you like to make a motion to approve the minutes?
So
Sure, I'll
removing
make that
that text.
motion.
Beg your
Okay.
pardon?
So I'm removing the text that's highlighted.
Yes, and I'll move approval with that correction.
Okay. We have, Lisa's made a motion to approve. Do I have a second?
I'll second it. Kevin.
Okay. Kevin has a second. We have first and second. Any discussions about those changes? I'm hearing none. Let's call the vote. All in favor of approving the minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
Both same sign. Minutes are approved. Chairperson report. I really don't have anything that isn't listed below. So let's just go ahead and move on to the airport manager's report. Rich, you're up.
Hey, John, can everyone hear me?
Absolutely.
Very good. From October 25 through November 25, 2020, 3 individuals made a total of 3 overflight noise complaints. I spoke and or emailed with everyone involved. In one case, I did speak with one of our rental pilots who was following the old noise abatement procedure as opposed to the newer noise abatement procedure that's been squared away. No aircraft accidents or incidents on the field. And we've collected about, at this point, about 65% of the hangar keys for the Knox boxes, where Deb is continuing, the office manager, is continuing to mention and remind gently everyone on board, and people are going to get their keys in to us, or at least most of them will. All right, other news. November 14, Maury Airplane Company hosted an FAA-sponsored safety seminar on complacency. It was well attended and well received. Actually, the rest of this, on the truck is redundant. Other than I did speak with Lynn Erickson, and we will be coordinating deliveries of fuel to all of the Swift Fuel dispensaries or areas in the area, trying to get one truck coming up to fill us all up. And that should work out relatively well and reduce costs. Okay, November 9, we went through with Middleton EMS, the training on the AED that was we have installed, as well as CPR research for some and certification for others. We are looking at in December, we will actually have a what they call the IMC club, or for visual pilots, your private pilot as opposed to VMC club for visual. And we're going to be using the simulator, the Redbird that we have. It has quite a bit of or very good optics on it, the visuals. So we'll be running through interesting scenarios with the EAA chapter members, and others are welcome to stop in on it as well. That's coming up on the 8th at about 6 o'clock. If you have any interest in it, give me a call. And that's it. Other than I did look into last year at this period, we had 8 noise complaints as opposed to the 3 this year. I'm not sure exactly what that indicates. I'd like to indicate, or like to think, that we're doing a better job.
I have a quick question about the keys.
Yes, sir.
So 65% of the keys that we have we went ahead and put those in the knock boxes? Are we putting them in batches, or what is our strategy here?
Well, we don't have a key to the Knox box, only
I know that you got to call the police department, but
right. So what we were planning on doing is giving it another week or two, and then try to do it all in one batch, as opposed to having them have to come out here a couple times.
yeah, I wouldn't wait too long, Rich. I didn't, in case there's some kind of an emergency or something, because the keys certainly don't do any good on somebody's desk. So
No.
I give it a little bit more, but they can always come back after you get the balance of the keys. At least we have 2/3 of the keys where they need to go. Okay, so Lisa has her hand up. Lisa, what's your question?
I have 3 things I wanted to mention. One, I had reached out to Rich to let him know I had a constituent ask me about a very intense gasoline smell that she has experienced at the soccer fields near the airport. And Rich, I received your response back saying it probably was, localized and just a particular jet had taken off. And she said she would ask around to see if other parents are experiencing it as a more pervasive thing throughout the game, because she described it as like eye-watering. So I'll get back to you once I hear from her. Also, I wanted to know if anyone had followed up on the noise complaint and open records requests that some of us received by email on November 21st. And then the third thing is, I'm just bringing this up since neighbor relations and airport safety are at the top of the list. I did the haunted hustle this year on October 23rd. And as my husband and I were leaving the parking lot, we saw a plane appear to jettison like a banner that it was trailing. It from our vantage point, it looked like an accident, and this banner might have landed on Airport Road. But then once we thought about it, we're like, oh, well, that was probably intentional. It did look, though, like the kind of thing that might make a driver on Airport Road do a double take and could potentially cause a safety concern. So I just thought I should mention that. I don't know what event was going on that day other than the haunted hustle, but I wanted to bring that to your attention.
Yeah, I'm not aware of any open records requests, so that's
Oh,
all news to me.
yeah. John, I received an email and from, I won't say who from, but someone that lives west of us making a open records request, asking for the name, telephone number, and contact information for someone flying an aircraft, one of our rentals. I am not, Maury Airplane Company is not a government entity. We are a private business. We've never given out names of any of the people flying the aircraft unless I get legal guidance requiring me to do so. I'm not going to do so. That was also the client that I spoke with. He or it, or she, excuse me, was following the old noise abatement procedure and turning over the power lines as opposed to simply turning over the when they reached pattern altitude, making the turn. Now, I know that's what the township wanted, but that's not what this particular homeowner wants who lives in the town. So that has been addressed. As for the rest of it, that was, I've not heard anything from Brian Gatto along those lines, nor the city attorney, of which we're all copied on this. And so I have proceeded as I have along those lines, and I'm not planning on giving anyone out contact information for the pilot.
I think it's the reciprocal of what we adopted earlier, and that is people that make noise complaints who were afraid that they would be targeted. We don't hand out that information either.
No, we
And
certainly
it'd be
do
the
not.
same thing for the pilots,
Mhm.
right? For them to be targeted. So I think if it's fair one way, it's fair in both directions. That specific incidents or unless we're legally compelled, there's probably something we don't want to start because we don't want to be the catalyst for two entities going after each other. So that's my thoughts on that.
As for the second, I'm undoubted, I have smelled jet fuel essentially every time a jet or turboprop comes in to land at this airport. It is part of the process. We're going to see that happen or smell it happen simply because at the lower power settings, you're putting some of the unburnt hydrocarbon jet fuel through the engine. Now, if the wind is such that it would blow toward the soccer fields, yes, you're going to get a smell. We get that at close to the airport as well when people taxi. I have never smelt any 100-octane smell, which is distinctive in its own way, but Jet A is particularly distinctive. It's like kerosene. And so they're really, I understand your desire, Alder, but I don't know that short of shutting the airport down, you're not going to get away from that type of occasional fuel odor. And as for the banner tower, this airport is open for all legal uses. We've had aircraft towing banners here as long as I can remember. They have never caused any accident or incident on airport road that I'm aware of. And yes, you have to jettison the banner and drop it, and then you come in and land, and then you set up a new banner and you tow it. So I understand, and we've run into this before, where people who don't understand airport operations see something and it bothers them and they're afraid of it, or they think it's going to be a problem when in reality it really isn't a problem. Again, I don't know that we want to or can ban banner towing from this airport. So that would be the only other option, because again, they've been operating and doing this certainly as long as the new configuration has been in effect, and prior to that, without any accidents or incidents.
Yep, it's not illegal to do it. I frankly, I hadn't seen anybody towing any banners. Usually, when we did it in Key West, we took off from the main runway. And then when we dropped it, we actually dropped it on the safety area alongside of the runway. Yeah, so it's you're right. Everybody has a right to use the airport, and it's not illegal to tow banners. So, okay. Rich, you have your hand up. Do you have anything extra?
No, that I was about to lower my hand, John, but thank you very much. I just wanted to respond to those questions, and I'll be
Okay.
happy to respond to them in more detail. But
Sure.
again, that's basically what we've got here. So
Sure. All right, I see Kevin, you have your hand up.
Yeah, so three quick things. So the banner towing, it's a great segue into what I'm going to present later on in the meeting as far as information and where to find that information as far as the proper procedures for banner towing and just general information. The second thing is that lately, for whatever reason, we've had inversion layers. Atmospheric conditions where a cold layer comes under a warm layer. And even if a delivery truck pulls up, and we live on Strawberry Loop, so it's a loop. So delivery trucks and the mail come through. And if they're diesel, my house fills up with diesel fumes because of the inversion layer traps that. So a lot of the smell we're getting, I can even smell it off the belt line, believe it or not. When we get these inversion layers where the regular MOGAS or avgas, you don't smell anything, but because of the incomplete burn, it's the nature of diesel. Yeah, you smell it. A couple of times I thought I had a fire in the house, and then I realized, oh, we have this inversion layer going on, and the fumes can't dissipate like they normally would. So that's probably what people are smelling. They're probably getting a lot more off of Airport Road and the belt line than they would from the airport. You know, we have a lot of delivery trucks these days as part of the environment, but I noticed the same thing. And at first I thought I had a fire in the house. I'm going, oh, those are diesel fumes. But realizing that we've had these weird inversion layers lately, and it just doesn't help to dissipate these fumes, especially with the diesel vehicles. And the third thing is, I just wanted to ask Rich. I realize we're in a drought, but we're probably going to have some snow. Is the airport in a pretty good situation where they're going to be able to handle the snow?
I believe we're all set. Kevin, we have done a plowing of a very light nature, but we had enough snow early in November, mid-November, that we moved some snow. But you never really know until you get your first heavy snow which hydraulic system's going to fail and what we need to do. But we have gone over everything as we always do prior, and we haven't been caught early with the heavy snow, so that's a blessing. So I think we're in a very good position. We have an excellent mix of equipment and some very good people here that know how to operate the equipment. I'd say we're good.
Okay, great. Thanks, Rich.
Mhm.
Okay, if no additional questions, let's move on to the airport financials. The airport financials are really nothing to discuss. We really haven't had much booked, if you will. My only question will be to talk to Diego about making sure we bill out all of the CARES 2 and 3. Because it looks like we have 82,000 projected here, and he's billed out 23. And 23, if I remember, is only 1 year's amount. So we need to get Mark or to get Diego to I mean, I can talk to Mark G at the BOA, and I'll send Diego an email if you'd like, and I could be a catalyst, but we should make sure we get all of our invoices turned in.
John, thanks for bringing that up. Why don't you write to Diego and copy Brian and me, please?
Yeah, I'll make a note of that.
All right, thank you.
Yeah. Other than that, I don't really see anything that is too new. There's some things not booked, I'm sure, and the books don't stabilize until January sometime anyhow. So with that, if there's any questions about the financials, I'll try to look at it and divine what's there, but there's really not much in the way of entry. Okay. So let's move on to item 2. Purchase of the used fuel truck for Swift 94 UL fuel. So we approved and we sent on a request to the common council to change the scope. We didn't ask them to change the terms. And the terms were originally the city was going to do 45. And the airport was going to be 30, and then we were going to, I think, split it after that. Why did it get changed? I mean, they've already had committed the money and booked it. Does anybody know?
Well, I introduced the motion. I went with the 30K that the Airport Enterprise Fund had already committed to. I don't recall your recollection, Mr. Chair, that it was going to be split 50-50 beyond the 75K.
Well, the 30,000, so just to make
I mean,
sure,
the dollar amount to the Airport Enterprise Fund is the same.
no, it's not. So there's a chronology here. So originally what happened was we had asked the city for funding for the unleaded fuel. Mike then raised the budget amount 30,000 within the airport fund. That wasn't really what we asked for. We asked for the city to provide new money. And Luke went in with who was the vice chair last year? Luke and Robert, excuse me. Sorry, I was slow tonight. So they went in and said, no, that's not exactly what we wanted. And what was negotiated was 45,000 would come from the city first, and then 30,000 and a split, and that was approved by the common council.
Yes, and so the $30,000 is still the charge to the Airport Enterprise Fund. If you're talking about the split being different, that's
Yeah.
not something that the Airport Commission talked about at our last meeting.
Well, then why did they change it?
They, as council, I proposed preserving the $30,000 contribution from the Airport Enterprise Fund with the rest to come from the TID fund. And that's what passed. So the Airport Enterprise Fund is still on the hook for the $30,000.
Yeah, but the way it was written is the first 45,000 was to come from the city. That was what was approved. I mean, I don't understand politics, and I really don't want to. If I did, I'd run for office, but it seems to me like if you approve something and you give somebody your word, that you're pretty honor bound to do it. You know, and
My understanding is that the airport as an enterprise fund is supposed to be as self-sufficient as possible. And this $30,000 was committed by the council from the Airport Enterprise Fund to pay for the design and engineering for a fuel farm.
yeah, but where did the
So-
$45,000 go to? That was supposed to be the first.
That's going to
Right.
be preserved in TID number 3.
So it's not going to go to the airport.
The 15,000 is available to the purchase.
I
of the
don't
fuel
understand
truck,
why-
Which may become moot based on what we received from the inspection. So, Mr. Chair, if you have an objection to the airport shouldering more of the burden for this purchase than the city itself does.
Yep.
You can raise it.
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion that we should go back to the city council and ask them to honor their previous agreement in terms of the amount of money and the sequence of it. It's important that the city support the airport. Lisa, if you go around to every local airport, every one of them has a contribution from local government. Ours is the only one that does it. I can tell you that Eagle River gets 250,000 from the county. I don't have any idea how much, Madison gets, but I can tell you that Baraboo, everyone gets money from the government, and we're the only one that doesn't. And I think the optics are not good. I mean, we're
Well,
trying to do something to help the city here. We're not obligated to put this fuel on. It's not illegal to use this fuel.
Well, I would respond by saying, first of all, Middleton is not the county. We are the municipal or the city.
Yes.
Second, I don't believe Brian and Mark charge any of their time to the airport enterprise fund. So that is a contribution. And I think it should be quantified. I think that would be a great way to show the city's contribution to the airport. And its continuing existence would be to document how much of staff time and salaries and benefits are actually taken up by airport related activities. So that is a contribution.
Well, I have a motion that I made. I don't know if anybody would like to second it.
Maybe it would be helpful to clarify the motion again.
Yeah.
John.
Sure. The motion I made was to go back to the city and ask them to restore the funding amounts and sequences as previously was approved by the Common Council. Does anybody else have an appetite for that? If not, we can move on.
I don't know.
I would second that.
I'd
Go
like,
ahead.
yeah,
I'm sorry, two of you spoke at once.
I had said I would second it.
Okay. So we have a first and a second. Michelle seconded it. Any additional discussion?
So my apologies, as I'm just want to make sure I fully understand is, and John, so what you're saying is ultimately what was originally said was the city will put 45,000 and the airport enterprise fund was 30.
Yes.
And what was passed was 15 coming from TID 3. And so your motion is then to say, actually it needs to be 45,000 coming from TID 3 as originally allocated, as originally proposed.
Yeah, and I also, Luke, talked about the sequencing of the funds. That the 45,000 comes from the city first, which was what was in the original motion. And then 30,000. And I don't have any problem with the on the sale of the vehicle. That, it's first in, first out kind of a situation to where city gets the revenue off of the fuel truck. And, the airport would be, second in line if there's anything left over. But, I think you voted for it, Luke, and as long as Robert, I mean, it was just support for the airport. And as I said earlier, this is something that we really didn't have. This truck is something we don't have to do. I think everybody has pretty much identified the fact that we're well below any limits for lead. And this is just the tip of the iceberg because we're gonna have to maintain this truck.
And Alderman Iro, remind me during the city council discussion when this was passed, what was the justification regarding reducing the input from TID 3 from 45 to 15?
The justification was to keep the airport enterprise fund contribution at the $30,000 committed previously. And doing the math, that leaves up to $15,000 that would be encumbered by TID 3. And I'll note that when we had this discussion, the decision or the suggestion that, let's say, when the truck is sold, that the funding go first back to TID 3 and then to the airport enterprise fund, that didn't come from me, that came from the council president. So I suspect there's going to be, I'm not sure to what extent you'll get support for this action.
Well, I think it's worthy of asking for it. It was promised. I see no reason why it should change.
In recollection was, John, though, that I think when we passed this back in March, the
Yes.
original cost estimate was closer to that 75,000 because we were thinking this was going to be an actual like in the ground fuel tank, right? And so
Yes.
so the fact that the scope has changed in addition since March as well. For now that we're looking at a portable vehicle.
Well, the amount of money allocated is shouldn't change based on the scope. I mean, everybody committed the same amount of dollars. And if it's the on the sale of the vehicle, assuming we get, approval of the new fuel soon, I mean, it will sell, the money goes back to TIF 3. I just find it to
But
be.
originally,
Go ahead.
yeah, but originally we allocated 45 from the
Yeah.
city, right? And now we're saying 15. And so, yeah, the one figure that's maintained is what the airport is contributing, whether it's the in the ground or the fuel truck, right?
Well, it's still, we've towards the problem, we've allocated money towards the problem. Yeah, we had allocated 45,000 and 30,000, and then the rest to be determined. And so whether it's in the ground or it's on wheels, whatever, it's still the same problem. Listen, the common council can say no again if that's their appetite. But I would feel remiss if I didn't remind them that they're previously approved by the common council. We have a lot of new people, and maybe those people aren't aware of it.
Mr. Chair, I'm reading the minutes from that meeting and it doesn't say what the sequence is. I think you would stand a better chance of prevailing on this both tonight and before council if you continue to have 40%, which is the original split, 40% come from the Airport Enterprise Fund. I don't see this passing if the full amount is going to come from TID 3. I just don't.
Well,
With no contribution from the Airport Enterprise Fund.
I certainly would be agreeable that, if you want to go work on percentages, that 60% of the funds come from the city, TIF 3 first, and then 40% of the funds come from the airport commission. And then, we just will true it up. I mean, we're going to know what that number is sooner than later. So that keeps the percentages the same. And so, I mean, I certainly, I see that as a reasonable compromise. Maintain the percentage, but not the dollar amount. So I could go ahead and recast the motion. And then we could see if Michelle still has the appetite to follow up, but I'd like to make the motion to the common council to restore the funding percentages and sequencing as previously approved by the common council. And I think, Elisa, does that get to where you were thinking?
The percentages, yes, but there was no sequencing spelled
Yes, there
out.
was.
I would like you to point to that in the record.
Yeah, it was Mark mailed it on a prior. You might mailed it in a prior document. Remember?
Are you referring to what's in the staff comments, which Brian wrote here?
Yeah,
I'm referring to the minutes from the March 1st, 2022 council meeting that says moved by Sullivan, seconded by Nelson to approve 45,000 from TID 3 and 30,000 paid for by the airport fund. And then anything above that will come back to TID 3.
So it sounds like what's shown as A here.
Yes,
I think that Alder Hanairo, that's what I just heard you read.
yes. Yes,
But then this was. Let me read this again here. Well, anyway, this is what Brian captured from previous actions. If that's, I assume he just got that from the minutes.
Right, B is from the council meeting minutes from the November 15th council meeting.
Yeah,
Oh, I see. So this is from November. And the first one was from
March.
March.
for March. Okay,
Yeah,
But there was nothing in the minutes to indicate that the first $45,000 would come from TID 3. $75,000 is available to pay for this.
yeah, what I received was a summary from Mike Davis of what they had approved. And I think I can, I could find that, but if that's not the officially what people voted on.
John,
uh,
I think Luke's explanation, I think he said a few minutes ago that the original concept was that that this 45 plus 30 was going to be, we assumed that was going to be spent as our match
Yes,
for funding for the fuel tank, right?
yes,
Luke, that's what you were saying, right? And
That's correct.
so the assumption was that both of those full amounts were going to be spent, 45 and 30. The percentage wasn't listed there, but the amounts were listed, which of course added together, you can come up with a percentage.
yes.
I did raise this at the finance committee to make sure that that was the intent of what the motion is to keep the 30,000 as part of the airport enterprise fund and not to keep the percentage the same. And that was a decision by the finance committee to keep the 30,000 from the enterprise fund the same, even though we flagged it.
Well, I'd still like to, make a request,
Yeah.
a motion or request to
Yeah.
the common council. And to restore a percentage split. And if there's no sequencing. And any sequencing, if provided. If provided,
So maybe it would be helpful, since sequencing is one of the concerns being raised here, maybe
but
that
it doesn't really matter if the percentages are resolved at the end. So as long as with the funding percentages as previously approved by the common council.
exactly for the total cost of acquisition of the truck and the adaptation, how it has to be adapted.
Exactly.
All that. So I
Right.
think your point, Mr. Chair, is that you would like to see the funding percentage.
Yes.
And I haven't done the math on what that is, but
Well, Lisa did, and she said that, and I trust her, there was 40% comes from the city. And, from the airport fund, and 60% comes from the, would come from the TIF 3. And, we will true it up, obviously, in sometime in the first quarter. I mean, we're gonna know what's going on there soon enough to calculate it.
I assume you
So-
can see what's on the screen. So this is the
Yeah.
amended motion. So
Yeah,
I think you're asking if the second agrees with that.
yes. So Michelle, I don't know if you have the appetite to go ahead and second this motion is slightly changed.
Yeah, I would second it. I understand where you're going and what you're
Okay.
looking for.
Okay. So is there any, so we have a first and a second. So any additional discussion? Kevin, you had your hand up a couple of times, so I'm gonna let you go first.
Yeah, if for no other reason, I mean, something has changed here. We made some assumptions. We're trying to move forward with the fuel truck. We need to know the funds that are available. And so, yeah, I think that we should pass this motion, send it back to the council and find out, where we are, more clarification at a minimum, whether we get what we want or not. So
Well,
just
the
my-
clarification will be in whether they approve it or not.
Right. Right. Okay, thanks.
Lisa?
I would just suggest that this motion doesn't contain enough, I mean, if you were to send this motion as approved to council, it would not contain enough information. I would suggest putting in the dollar amounts that you're requesting.
Well, we want to ask the common council to restore the funding percentages.
I get it, but the motion itself should be crystal clear to anyone reading it, not knowing context, what it's asking for. And
Yeah,
to
but
say
I
to
can't tell you
restore the
that.
funding-
I don't know
To say
it.
restore the funding percentages is not crystal clear. To say uh, to specify 27,000 from TID 3 and 18,000 from the Airport Enterprise Fund.
Okay,
That-
well, then we could certainly add to it. We would consider allocating the fund percentages between the funds used by the council in March up to, and the previous number was 45 and 30, up to $75,000 gross. Now, it's not going to be 75,000. But I don't know how to give you a number because we're still in the process of purchasing the truck and fixing anything that might need to be fixed.
Well, the total amount requested of council on November 15th was $45,000. I don't know
Yes.
about Alder Fassard, but I am not at all prepared to ask council for $75,000.
Well,
even
I
though
didn't
that's
say
what they
that.
did.
I was still asking the council for 45,000. I said up to an aggregate amount of 75,000. And that would come back to 45 and 30. That was the previous approval.
Right, but as a member of council, I'm not going to vote to approve up to $75,000 in expenditures for an estimated $45,000 project.
We're not asking the council to do that. We're asking the council to pay 40% of that, which is 40,000, 45,000, or 60%, which is $45,000. So, I mean, we could actually, I can specify that. So amend the motion, but to apply the funding percentages between the Airport Enterprise Fund, 40 and 60, as used by the council in March, with the understanding that TIF District 3 would not exceed 45,000. Which was the previous commitment.
Why would we not set that cap at whatever that 60% of the 45 of the fuel truck is?
Well, we don't really know what the fuel truck overall cost is.
Sure.
We have to ship it here. We got to finish the inspections. We got to make sure everything's converted over and safe. So we really don't know the bottom line number. We have a pretty good idea what it is. I mean, I think listen, it's not going to cost 45,000 for the common council. But at least we,
Can I ask a question?
at least we,
I'm sorry.
go ahead.
Yeah, so my question is it sort of saying, okay, $45,000 will first or 60% or 45,000 will come from TID 3. And when that 45,000 is spent, additional money needed will then come from the Airport Enterprise Fund? Is that what we're getting at? So
There's not that much. It's, I mean, the cost of the truck is not that much.
Mhm.
It's gonna be less than 45,000.
sure, right, yeah.
I mean,
I get
Lisa asked for a number so that there was a cap. Because there needs to be a cap, and I understand that. That makes good sense. So I added the cap that the TIF, the 60%. That would come from TIF District 3 would not exceed 45,000. I mean, how could it? Rich, what was the cost of the truck? I forget now. 30 something, 38, 39? Rich?
Sorry, I had to unmute. I'd have to go back and look at the numbers, my notes to give you an exact number, John, but I believe your recollection is right.
Yeah, I
in
was thinking it was
ballpark.
like 39,000 is what it is. And then there's the shipping. There's the inspection, which we just had. And then there's gonna be some maintenance to it. The injectors are probably gonna need to be cleaned and everything else, because it's been setting, it's a diesel truck. And I don't know if it needs any hoses or anything, but
Shouldn't. but-
I can't see it's gonna be that big a deal.
Well, I think the not to exceed number is what we've gone with before. That
Yeah.
makes sense to me.
Yeah, so it's basically, it says consider funding for acquisition, having 40% paid for by the Airport Enterprise Fund, 60% by TFT. which was previously agreed to. And with the understanding that TIF District 3's amount would not exceed 45,000. It is not, it can't possibly.
So is this clear to convey the intent and as Lisa noted, just so that the motion kind of stands by itself and is more clear for everybody? Is that the intent, John, of what you're trying to say?
I believe it is correct, and if you want to add the cap, I'm more than happy to add the cap of, not to exceed 45,000. I know it's not gonna be more than that, but it's gonna be less than that, but I don't know what that number is.
The
Well,
cap
there's-
of 45,000 for the entire expense or for TID 3?
TIF 3.
Because the entire amount that council approved, because remember, they rescinded the March motion. So that's gone. So what we approved on November 15th was $45,000, which was a few $1,000s more than the, I think, 41,500 that was estimated for the option 2.
Yeah, but what we're asking for them is they obviously rescinded it, and we're asking them to restore it.
I don't think you understood my point. My point is that we no longer have $75,000 on the table. It is now $45,000. So if
Okay,
there's
so-
going to be a cap specified, it should be that $45,000 cap. Otherwise, the motion needs to say reconsider the percentage allocation and allocate more. Those are two separate things.
I don't think, I don't understand that. I mean, if we could say that the TIF 3 would not exceed a certain percentage. I mean, I think that protects everyone. Mark? you have a
If I can
comment?
help, I think what Lisa's trying to say is that the council has now decided that they are applying a total of authorizing up to $45,000 for the fuel truck in Ohio. 30,000 of it is coming from the Airport Enterprise Fund, 15 from TID 3. That's what's currently authorized in terms of the expenditure, 45,000, because the previous $75,000 expenditure has been rescinded. So she's saying that 45,000 is the current cap. What your motion does is to reallocate the distribution of the expenses from those two sources, but it doesn't address the cap of 45,000. So
Well, then I would say that then I think we could say here, originally funded percentage that approved for the acquisition of fuel tank. And I think we could add with the aggregate cost of the acquisition not to exceed 50,000.
Why 50 and not the
Then-
45?
Well, because it's probably a closer estimate. It's gonna be 39, it's gonna be 5,000 probably to fix the injectors. So that's gonna be 39 and 5 is gonna be 44. We've got to ship it here. And there could be some other changes, so 50 is probably a decent guess as an aggregate amount, could be slightly more. With the
So
understanding.
60% of 50, that's 30K, which is that kind of the halfway point between the original 45 that was asked for and the 15 that was allocated.
Yeah, we're swapping
So,
it back, the allocation goes more to TIF District 3. As originally
Right,
was.
right,
planned.
right.
how is
So
this?
30 yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry, here's where I put it. I put it up here.
Management that the council reconsider the funding sources for $50,000. For this expense authorized if there's which of the funding percent of March. Yeah, I mean, as long as they know that's not the top line.
Well, I mean, that was a problem either way. So 2 weeks ago, following the council's November 15th meeting, they authorized 45,000. If we found out by now that it would have cost 48,000, we would have had the dilemma either way. So
Yeah, I think it's gonna be roughly closer to 50,000, to be honest with you. If I look at the shipping and I look at the report that I got, that Greg sent me on the injectors and some of the other things, which makes sense because it's sitting there and injectors can clog up. I think with an estimated total cost of 50,000, I think it's reasonable. Would they reconsider the funding for for the purchase of the truck? Right? So you would take out the 45,000 expender, just reconsider the funding for the acquisition of the fuel truck. By having it, 40% of the expenses paid by the fund, 60% by TIF. Which was originally funding percentages used by the council in March. When it was approved for the acquisition of fuel tank. With a total cost not to exceed 50,000.
So you're asking the reconsideration of both the funding sources and the total expenditure.
I'm asking them to maintain their percentage. I'm asking, and I'm reducing the overall amount of the total ask.
Right. I
Right.
think the way I phrased it gets at the concerns that you've raised is you want the distribution changed and you want the total expenditure to increase from 45,000 to 50,000.
Yeah, I think I think it's an honest number.
Okay. Sorry to help you with this. I was just,
No, listen, I'll take all the help I can get.
I'm not trying to put words in your mouth. I'm trying to help.
No, I mean, clarity is important.
Okay.
So anyway, okay, Michelle, one more time. Are you still interested in seconding the motion as written?
Yes.
Okay, so we have a first and a second. Is there any more discussion? If not, I'd like to call the vote. All in favor of approving the motion, please say aye. Aye.
I,
I,
All opposed, say no.
No,
Okay, so it's passed with everyone to one. Okay.
6 to
Great.
1. Okay.
Yeah, 6-1. All right, thank you. That was given birth, but that's good. So we've got that done. So just a couple of updates here. I can tell you about this beyond the funds. So we negotiated a contract where $5,000 was already paid to ProFlow, with the understanding that if where funding didn't come through, that the full amount would be refunded, which everybody agreed to. We have had one inspection of the truck, and it was for a couple $100. We'll just pay that through the airport maintenance fund, with an estimate for a couple of other things. It could be $2,500 to $5,000. Maintenance, because the injectors were clogged or something of smoke. I've owned diesels, and that's not uncommon. The discussion was whether or not we should have it fixed remotely, or we should have it fixed locally. And Rich, where did you come down on that on that decision? Hello, Rich.
Sorry, still muted. Since that operation down there has already inspected it and knows what needs to be done, Greg and I, along with your input, came to the conclusion that it's probably best to get it done there and then ship it up, and it'll be ready to go instead of getting it here.
Okay.
So that
All right.
seems like the best option. They're already familiar with the problems. They've done the inspection. They don't have to redo any additional business or work on it.
So the inspections is in two components. So there's a truck with an engine and the wheels and a cab, and then a flatbed on the back. And then there's the pumping equipment that are customized, put on it for this specific use. And so we've had the truck inspected by a local Ford truck dealer, I think it was a Ford, and the fuel company that helped us with the transaction graciously agreed that they are going to provide the inspection of the mechanical equipment before it's shipped. And we don't really anticipate an issue there because it's fully rebuilt. So we're going to know a lot more once everything is here, which should not take long. And if there's any questions I can answer on any of that, I'd be happy to do so. Okay. So that's the status, and with any luck at all, there'll be something, it'll be here in December. It'll be in a running condition. It sounds like Rich is already coordinating the fuel. Okay, Lisa, I see your head again.
I'm just wondering, so we got the inspection report and looking at the text that's on the screen right now, would we agree that there's been a proper inspection of the vehicle concluding with a satisfactory inspection report? Because that was one of the conditions put
Yeah,
on. the
I
funding
would
of-
say, to the best of my knowledge, the answer would be. I think the answer is going to be yes. However, I had originally thought that maybe we should go back and try to negotiate a lower price, but I don't think that's actually going to happen. Because the price is kind of pretty good for the market. And if we're in for 39.5, which would be 44, we're still in a pretty good position compared to all the alternatives. I mean, we've been around the block on this thing since, does BOA pay for it? Can they pay for it? No, they can't pay for it. Can we do it ourselves? It's gonna be 100,000, BOA is gonna be 400,000. Is the fuel gonna come through? I mean, gosh. So I think to put this thing to bed, I wouldn't have heartburn over saying that it is in good condition and that any work that we do would be typical maintenance. And so that would be my recommendation. Rich, I don't know, you got your hand up, jump in.
Well, being an aircraft mechanic, sometimes the initial inspection, once you get it in the shop and open things up, things can happen. I'm just wanting to be I don't think that's going to be the case. I think what they came up with is most likely going to be, what's wrong and the repairs are going to be within that range. But there is always the possibility that they're going to find a deal breaker once they open this up. So I just want to at least bring that. I believe that's what Lisa was getting at, that
Sure.
until we know for sure, this still could be a bad deal. I don't think it is, but that's the only caution I would have. Let's get it over to the shop and let them do get into it, and then we'll know for sure.
Yeah, I think I would agree, Rich. I mean, if you found that you open it up and bolts fell out, I mean, you go back to the seller and say, listen, here's the inspection report. You have your mechanics look at it, and we have to negotiate a better price, or this is not going to work out. And we start all over again. David, you have your hand up, sir.
Thanks. Yeah, reading over that inspection report, the only thing I saw on there that comes out is this coolant leak on the right side of the engine. So it's one thing if it's a coolant leak from part of the cooling system.
Yeah.
It's another thing if it's a coolant leak coming from a gasket on the engine.
Yep.
Is it a gasket around the water pump, or is this a gasket somewhere on the head? And that's, so I think I'm just echoing what Rich said. That can be pretty big and expensive. And so,
You don't have to take the car, the vehicle.
okay, compression test, would probably review.
I mean, I'm more than happy to go back to the president. Because I talked to him about the first part of the agreement, to give us our money back.
Good.
But when we buy airplanes and other cars and stuff, we usually have a normal maintenance kind of a clause that basically says, if there's normal maintenance to be had,
Yeah.
we'll go take care of the maintenance. If there's something that's beyond normal maintenance, then
Yeah, I mean, replacing cooling system components, hoses, clamps, and seals, and like you said, fuel components, injectors, and that. But yeah, I mean, a head gasket leak.
I mean, I
Well-
can't, I mean, we just have to let the mechanic. look
Even
at
if it was a head gasket leak, okay, so do we want to fix a head gasket, which is probably, I don't know, in a vehicle like that, $5,000.
Well, I mean, I don't know, we could also, go back and ask the gentleman to, cover any maintenance fees, in excess of $5,000.
Yeah, I'm just,
I know you're just throwing it out there, and I'm
Yeah.
just thinking if I'm selling something, I don't want some inspector coming up and saying, I gotta overhaul the engine. Right? If it's beyond normal wear and tear, I can understand that.
yeah,
But I'm not gonna sign up for, whatever anybody says is wrong.
so that's all. I mean, I've worked with engine purchases in the past as well, and a coolant leak on a head gasket. I mean, it only is, it's an indication of a one-way problem. So,
You wanna go to Ohio
well,
and oversee the work? They'll give you some hours in the airplane.
right. Well, yeah, that's right. Let me think about that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, anything else? Okay, moving on to the capital fight request for the pedestrian gate. I've given this a lot of thought, and I'll give you what my thoughts are. And then you can, at least it'll start the discussion. First of all, for capital flight's business, if you will, if I was a customer of Capital Flight, I would want to come in through the gate and I'd want to park my Capital Flight, and there is some parking there. I would not want to park on the other side of the road along the road and try to drag my flight bag and everything on across. And I'm sure that that's exactly what they're doing now. They're letting people in, and that makes Capital Flight responsible for who they let in and who they don't let in. So we do have a check and a balance on a daily basis for the entries. It's not as easy as just a gate. Also, if you put the gate in, the gate's got to go. There's got to be a walkway change and some changes to the walkway. But it's the gate to nowhere. There's no parking. I mean, there's no parking alongside of Airport Road. I mean, they have to park over either in the airport parking lot and walk over, or they've got to park over in the industrial park. And frankly, that just doesn't make any sense. So from a utility standpoint, from operating on a day-to-day basis, I don't see this. It totally makes sense. So that's number one. For an event, we're bringing in, I mean, the purpose of this gate is this is controlled aviation area. Between our last meeting and this, we've had a communique from the FAA to be extremely vigilant, because there was a notice that somebody might steal an airplane and they would weaponize the airplane. So, I mean, we have to think about it in our first obligation. And our first obligation is this is a federally secure area, and we have to treat it as a federally secure area. Now, if we're going to have an event, let's say we're going to have Rock the Ramp. In that case, what really probably should happen is one of two things. One is over by the airport, we open the gate and we hire the local police department, if they're off duty, to man a couple of tables and to administer security. Now, we could do the same thing over at the gate, over where Capital Flight is. We could do it actually in both places if the event provider wants to provide the security to go in and out. So I would say you leave the gate open. you have your police department there. And there's definitely fencing and temporary fencing cones, whatever. So, and a map there that tells people where they can and they can't walk. They can't go over to the hangar areas, the other secure areas, and they can't go anywhere that's not identified by the event. So I just don't see that this gate does anything of significance. So that's my thought. And anybody's got any thoughts on this or want to have a discussion on it? I mean, we can. And but I just don't see the utility. And by the way, it'll cost us $10,000 anyhow, because we've got to put in the sidewalks and everything else. And what do? Do we give everybody out the codes? Who's responsible? So I see it to be problematic with regard to our security obligations. Commissioners, there you go. Kevin, you got your hand up.
Sure, go ahead, Kevin. Yep.
Oh, thank you. So I'm looking at what someone's calling the 2 pedestrian gates. Those aren't pedestrian gates. Those are pilot gates.
Yes.
And the way they work is on the other side of the gate, I've used a lot of these, I've flown in and out of hundreds of airports, is there's the code, and the pilot is supposed to use the code to get in and out. Now, if the pilot has passengers, the passengers must stay with the pilot. So it's not a pedestrian gate. You can't have pedestrians on the airport. And there's a lot of documents out there that describe security at General Aviation Airport. So I don't know how that pedestrian got in there. So that's a pilot access gate, certified by the FAA pilot, and the passengers have to stay with the pilots, and they're not to be given out the codes either, because then you lose your integrity. So if we go back to the gate over down by Capitol Flight, there is a gate there, right? Just to the
Yes.
just to the east, right there. Yeah. So there's a gate right there, and again, restricted access to the hangar owners, and perhaps maybe some of the mechanics and flight instructors that work there are the only people that should have those the codes to get in and out of that. And also there's a lot of other rules. You can't piggyback. For instance, you can't open the gate, you're going through the gate and let other people through the gate. And there's a lot of other rules. So there's the TSA has the documents out there and best practices and guidances and all that. And remember, guidance documents are interpreted as regulations unless you can petition these agencies that your practices are better. So something I'm going to talk about here in a few minutes. So yeah, so I was a little confused at why another gate just slightly west of the one that's already there. So those are some of the questions I have.
Yeah, I don't see the utility. It's like I said, it's the people have to come from somewhere. Right? And they're not gonna park over in Kiva's parking lot and take up their parking spaces and walk their flight bags on across in the middle of winter. I sure as hell would do it. I'd find me another training facility.
And John, since Kevin asked what the source of the pedestrian gate is, I take responsibility for that. I simply was calling it a pedestrian gate because it can't accommodate a vehicle. I wasn't trying to make a distinction between the public and pilots. It's
Yeah,
just
I'm
whoever
not
goes
so-
through.
Oh, okay, thanks, Mark.
Yeah.
I'm not so sure I didn't use that word, Mark.
Yeah.
I did, I
And the
might have
point-
used it first.
Yeah, the point is, to the right of this, the lower picture here, this is a gate that only a pedestrian can go through. Kevin's saying it should be a pilot. I get
It is
that.
a pilot gate.
But only a pedestrian can go through there. To the right of this gate is a vehicle gate, and that was the sole distinction.
No airport will give out a code to anybody that is not a pilot who doesn't have an airplane inside of there, that doesn't belong in there. Period. I'm gonna start at the top with Luke. Luke, you had your hand up. Luke?
Yes, thank you. So my understanding is there is periodic traffic whereby an individual will fly into the Capitol flight and then be picked up, whether it's through an Uber or through some sort of other transport right outside of that particular area. So I think there is an alternate case in terms of even without the parking component associated with it. And I also believe that the gate that we talked about kind of being currently present is only activated by vehicles, meaning like if you're standing on the inside of it, there's got to be a minimum of, I think, approximately about a ton before it opens. And if it's an individual without a vehicle, that will not automatically open. And then I think on the third side, in terms of Kevin's point on the codes, there is communication on how to use the codes for the existing pilot gates. And so this would just be another instance where there would be some signage or et cetera, where those codes would be available. So I think that I just wanted to kind of clarify there.
Yeah, I feel it was, my thoughts are, if somebody was going to have Uber pick them up, somebody from Capitol Flight would open the gate and they would wait for them out on the sidewalk. They wouldn't necessarily need Uber to come into the secure area. You'd stand on the curb. I mean, when I go use Uber in other cities, I stand on the curb and tell them roughly where I'm going to be, and they pick me up.
I think that the thing is for them to get to the curb, this would be an alternate, because right now, if I'm just an individual walking, I can't get out that gate that's currently there by Capitol Flight because I'm not a vehicle. So I would have to walk to the other pilot exit. And so this would be an opportunity for them to get to the curb.
Yeah, whoever's at Capitol Flight could let them out through the gate. They have a remote control that they can let them out, and then they can wait on the curb, if you will. So, or they can hoof it over to the terminal building. I don't know how many airports I've landed at that, they put me on the south ramp or the north ramp, and I've got to grab my stuff and I have to, go over to the terminal building to get out. I mean, it isn't always perfectly convenient. I mean, the thing we have to balance is the integrity of our security, versus, I guess, convenience. And at some point in time, security is probably going to have to come to the top.
So, John,
Would this be any less?
I'm happy
go
to
ahead.
clarify a few of the points so that it's not.
Matt, you're not part of the commission. We'll get to you. We'll ask you if you'd like to provide any additional information. So right now, let's let the commissioners talk, okay?
Thanks, John.
I was just going to say, would this be any less secure than the existing pilot gates?
It would depend upon, well, first of all, it's still going to cost us about $10,000. And
Sure.
it all depends on how people respect the code. And handing out of the codes.
That's true of the existing gates though, too, right?
That is absolutely correct.
So is it really more of a money issue or is it security?
I think it's both. I don't really see.
David's got his hand up, so I'll let him.
I beg your pardon?
I'm sorry, David's had his hand up patiently, so I will cede the floor.
Okay, all right. So let me talk to David first. David?
Yeah, so combined question with statement. One is, can the existing gate, the power gate over there, have a keypad on both sides? That, so, an out-of-town flyer would be given, and then they can exit that gate and then close the gate, get in their Uber, and then come back later at night and get back in. So that's a technical question: feasibility, costs, security issues, and I'll let probably Rich can chime in on that.
Yeah, well, there's a keypad there anyhow to get in.
Okay,
Yeah,
All right.
right, because you have to operate the gate from the car, so.
I thought there was a remote and that's why Capital Flight actually had to let people in.
All of these gates have a remote component if you have the code.
Okay,
They could also add a second interior keypad to key
that's
it
it.
to open it. That's
So that's what they would need to add. Is
a
add,
possibility.
and
The
then,
possibility is we just add a second keypad on the inside,
yeah,
let the people inside to get out.
yeah, and for our other members of the commission, that are not aviators. So I spend a lot of time going in and out of that airport at night when nobody's around. So from a pilot perspective,
Yes.
yeah, being able to park your car and get in and out of there is important. Because when it's dark, you can't see stuff and you're carrying your flight gear. So, I mean, there's a convenience factor there.
Sure.
Um,
And there also is, if you fly in with guests.
Yeah.
And they've got luggage, right? And you're gonna be picked up because. You have a rental car, where the rental cars are over at the other terminal.
yeah.
But for events, you just lock the gate open. And you have a security guard there at the table and instructions on secure areas. And you don't need anything else.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, exactly. So it's pretty common for me. I'll get out there at night, evening, and I'll be doing pre-flight and getting the airplane ready. And I'll tell my guests, come out at a certain time so they don't have to wait around. And then I walk over and let them in. So, yeah, I mean, it's.
Yeah, I don't have any pushback on the possibility of another keypad on the inside. I mean, I think that's a good compromise. So, or we move too far further along. Obviously, Matt is on this call. Does anybody have any questions you would like to ask of Matt, or any clarifications of Matt, in which case he can provide those? Or do we think we've got it pretty well covered? And then we're ready to move on, because I'd be willing to make a motion that we can explore an additional keypad on the inside of the gate to allow people that are inside or guests inside to go outside. They have to be, follow security procedures, and they have to be guided by the pilot. I mean, it isn't just anybody comes in or comes out. But I think I could go along with that.
John,
Right.
can I ask a question for clarification? So do the existing, I won't call it pedestrian gate. Well, the gates that aren't, let's call it a pedestrian gate because that's what we mean.
Pilot gates.
Are any of those, if there's an emergency in the airport, let's say, and somebody needed to leave and you wanted to get away from a hangar or plane, and you as a pedestrian wanted to get out, can those existing pedestrian access gates be used in an emergency to leave? Or in other words, do they open from the inside? I guess that's a question for Rich. And then the second observation I would make is that what distinguishes this request, I think, from any other hangar is that we have a SASO agreement with Capital Flight, and they provide additional services that other hangars don't provide. So I would
Yeah,
just point
but the customer, I mean, Capital Flight is going to have to govern their customers and who can come in and let them in, because anybody that wants to do business is going to want to park right by the business. I mean, it's been operating that way for years. So with respect to the inside, usually there's a doorknob on the inside. You can twist it and open it. Can't recall whether we have it or not.
We
I
do.
mean, Rich, okay, you got your hand up, so why don't you jump in the hot water here too with me?
There you go. Yeah, absolutely, Mark. It is, you can get out. You can get out of the terminal building. You can get out of the vehicle gates if you have a car or a heavy enough motorcycle, and you can get out of the pilot gates not knowing any code. You simply can go out. You can't get back in is the problem unless you have the code. But in an emergency, yeah, you can get the heck out of Dodge without any impediment.
But you can't currently, as was described earlier, you can't get out at the vehicle power gate, as David called it. You can't get out as a pedestrian now. I guess that was a concern that I would.
You cannot. And the
But you would if
easiest
you-
way,
you-
which I suggested last time, is simply to have if you know you're going to have someone coming in late to your business and tie down out front and need to get an Uber, you can get a coded little box with a garage door opener, put it on your knob and give them that code. You can open up the garage or the gate. Otherwise, we can look into how expensive it might be to put a keypad on the inside. Honestly, on the inside, all you need is a switch. Just press the button and have the gate open. That's
Sure.
what you'd want because then you'd keep your integrity. But again, if you're on the inside, you're a pilot or passengers, and you know, having the keypad on the inside, having a gate code listed there, that is consistent with security at this airport and most airports. So,
Yeah, a lot of the airports that I go to, if there's a remote ramp, some of them even have golf carts. You know, they just roll out with the golf cart and they grab your bags and throw them in the back and take you over to the main terminal, where they have appropriate security. So, let me finish up with the motion and then see if anybody wants to second it. And then we'll discuss it further and we'll see if anybody wants Matt to discuss it. And, you know, so we have full access to information from everybody. But I'd be happy making a motion that we should explore inside internal keypad and the cost associated with it as an alternative that would give people inside a way to get out. Now, all the other pedestrian gates or pilot gates, they have a doorknob on them, right? And if you have a car, it always opens. But if you're looking for a person to get in and out, then we would have to add a keypad to this gate, I think. Anybody have the appetite to second that motion?
I'll second it.
Okay, so we have a first and a second. Now we can continue the discussion. Would anybody like to have Mr. Holfeld respond to the motion and provide his thoughts?
I would, absolutely.
Okay, Matt, so you're on.
Fantastic. So I'm happy to go over the utility of the request and why we're doing this and provide some of the justification again. And now that some of the commissioners are all on the same level as it relates to what the definitions of some of these things are, what I would first state is that what we are asking for is a walk gate, a pilot gate that functions and looks and smells just like the other two that are on either side of the terminal at the airport now. Lest anyone be confused about that, it is asking for the exact same thing that is currently at the airport. We, having our SASO agreement, are in a commercial area of the airport. There are multiple, but ours, unfortunately, when it was set up, and this is far before our time, did not have a fence that intersects or cuts through the hangars to allow public parking access up to the hangar. So we have had to work around that in a number of ways. And we can't change it, so the workarounds are what we do. But when folks do come in, sometimes at night, dropping off an aircraft, whatever it might be, on our ramp, having them get out on foot is impossible. Putting a keypad on that side to open the motorized gate would accomplish that goal. I do agree. What it does not accomplish, however, is the second part of my ask. And the second part of the ask is that when we do have events, and to John's point, people would not want to do everyday flight training, the things that we do on the normal course of business, parking at Kiva and walking over. Of course, it doesn't make sense. We have ample parking for what we do on a normal day. When we have events, safety seminars, whatever it is, at our hangar, where the parking is either not ample or whatever it may be, to let folks in that do park in the terminal parking lot and walk over, or the industrial park and walk over, the parks and walk over, whatever it may be, they have to walk through the drive gate. To walk through the drive gate, we have to have the gate open. Have the gate open means that it is open. We can't block it open a little bit to allow people to just come and go and not cars, because we have hangar neighbors that share that gate and they need full access to their hangars with their cars or whatever they want. So this allows that gate to serve as a people only, or a pedestrian gate, I will call it, to allow people to access our area on those special days without having to block open the large drive gate. Now, on very, very big events where it is general public, off the ramp, that sort of, yes, we have guards, we have security, we have a whole different thing as the gates are open. The general public is around, you know, that kind of thing. So that certainly is addressed for that. This is more the smaller, like I said, pilot aimed events and things like that. So folks have an understanding of airport policies and procedures and that sort of thing, but they can't get in and out. And blocking that gate open, also to John's point, does not help security, having to have that open. So we're trying to alleviate both problems with one very simple, what I thought was very simple ask, which is to get a third and identical to the existing two gate down on our side. If anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer that, but I hope that helps clear things up. We had some preliminary estimates done from the fence folks that have done some repairs and things out there before, locksmiths that do the lock mechanisms, and some concrete that would connect the sidewalk to our existing paved parking lot area. And it's more in line with about $5,000 to $6,000.
Well, you still got to
roughly.
do the sidewalk. You still got to do the sidewalk outside too. You have to rebuild the sidewalks.
They would just butt up to that sidewalk.
Well, you understand what I'm
You're
saying? The walkway has to go to the sidewalk.
Yes, exactly. We're saying the same thing. So we did have that looked at, and that was the rough cost. Preliminary estimates from those folks. So it's not quite as bad as we thought, but it still is a cost. There's no question.
So what would be wrong with having your guests go to the terminal building and then just call you on the cell phone, and then you guys go over and pick them up and take them over to the event?
So if we've got 100 people coming in, I go over 50 times to pick folks up and back.
You can pick them in groups, I guess. I mean, you have 100 people come to any given event. I mean, is that something that we would, to the best of my knowledge, we only have two. You know, we have the car show and we have the other 100.
These are,
what would be the event?
these are when we have safety seminars and different events that happen in our hangar that are contained within our building, that sort of thing. But it does happen quite often. The charity fundraisers that we do, a lot of those things happen. And these are the logistical, issues that happen.
Yeah, if you had 100 people, I think it'd be worthwhile leaving the gate open and just having somebody man it during the period that people are wanting to come in. I mean, that's from a security standpoint, less is more. I mean, like I said, the keypad.
Well, from a security standpoint, I would agree less is more. And to be honest, our airport has a one-sided fence. So I think we're painting the picture of Fort Knox here, and that is not what we have. This is not a military or commercially served airport. It is not a TSA secure area.
We
We've got a
understand that.
6-foot fence on one side of the airport. What we're asking for is what exists right now, and having a level fair playing field as an institution that pays commercial rates for our facility to have an equal and fair playing field. That is what we're asking for. And we were willing to share in the cost of this.
Mhm.
Because we understand we're making this ask,
Yeah.
and none of our other neighbors are. We certainly understand that.
Yeah, okay. All right, thanks, Matt. Does anybody, any of the commissioners have any additional questions to ask of Matt? Okay, I see, Rich, your hand is still up. I don't know if that's by accident. I can't hear you.
By accident, sorry, John.
Yeah, not a problem. So, nobody has any additional questions to ask of
Yeah.
Matt? So I made a
Yeah.
motion that we would explore a keypad on the inside, and we have a second to that. Any discussion before I call a vote on that?
John, I think I'd be remiss if I didn't report on my observations from a staff standpoint, and I think Rich maybe has seen this too. When that vehicle gate is open,
Yes,
people have a desire to drive in there with their vehicles. It's
yes,
just a natural thing. And we've talked about that already, that when the gate is open, there's a delay and all that, and people just drive in. What I've observed when there's been a seminar there, and I went to a weather one once because I was interested in the topic,
yes,
they try to direct drivers to go to the terminal and park at the terminal, or if necessary, across the street. But usually for the small events that Matt was talking about, people can be accommodated in the terminal building. You don't want them then walking from the terminal through the gates there to across the along the runway and all that. You want them coming on the sidewalk to the building. They try to guide people to park in the terminal area, and they want the access here for these smaller events that they host. And
if
it's
they
more,
still can use the gate open, they can still have security. If the gate's open, you have to have security there. And the security doesn't have to let people park there with their cars. They'll redirect them to go park over the terminal and to walk back.
well, I'm just reporting to you how
No,
I've
I
observed it.
understand, Mark. I'm not trying to be difficult. I'm just trying to be practical.
I would just add, just my own experiences, out at the airport. Just take it for what it's worth. So when there is a small event at the airport, probably 25, 30 people, after hours. So the FBO is closed. And these events are for pilots or people who are definitely invited out there, right? And they don't know the code for the pilot walkthrough gate. So what happens is a host leaves the door ajar in the FBO, and the guests simply enter that way. And that's pretty much how it is after hours for, say, a seminar or any kind of event. So the people showing up, yes, they're pilots. They wouldn't be able to get into the property unless somebody left some kind of gate or door or mechanism ajar. So I think what Matt's dealing with the same scenario when he hosts kind of those scale events down on his end. And during the flying season, I would say they're somewhat routine. And I mean, Rich might have some context to that, just for everybody to think about.
Well, I made a motion where I think it's a compromise, but you know what? Somebody can make a replacement motion. I mean, if you think that we ought to approve, if you think we ought to approve the gate and the sidewalk, and the motion can include having the Capital Flight pay for all costs. I mean, it's whatever you think of. My motion was simple. I thought we could use existing gate and just put a keypad on the inside to let people out, and then they get the Uber on the side. And hopefully people are healthy enough to walk over to the terminal building, and it provides some, but listen, if somebody wants to put a replacement motion or to vote against this, I mean, that's fine. I just see this as a place to start. Lisa?
Mr. Chair, I'm admittedly no aviation expert, but it sounds to me like propping open a door that should be locked at all times undermines our airport security.
Yes.
And personally, I would like to call the question, although I see now we have 2 other hands raised.
I agree. I mean, there has to be somebody there to open the gate for whoever the person is. Or you have to hand out the codes. I mean, you only have 2 options. So, Kevin Munson,
Yeah, so yeah, I agree with Lisa 100%. You cannot prop open the gates. You lose the integrity of security, and there is TSA standards, which I'll be talking about again. This 56-page document on general aviation airport security. Remember, all this 9/11 stuff started at general aviation airports. So of course there is extensive standards around security at these airports. And I was involved in some of the airports out in California getting those up to standards, but you cannot, under any circumstances, ever leave a locked gate ajar. So you're out of compliance. Thank you.
I'd say
Yeah,
unless
and when when these events are held at the FBO during after hours, they're pilot only events, and it's when a person enters the FBO during after hours, the hosts are there. You know, it's a system of monitoring.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter.
Mhm.
Okay, so let's go back up to Luke. Luke, you got the floor?
Yeah, so not in the interest of kicking the can, but I think we've heard a couple of different numbers in terms of what the actual cost to this would be.
Yes.
And what I am proposing then, perhaps as a substitute motion, is that between now and the next airport commission meeting, perhaps working with Mark Opitz or however we want to handle this, actually solicit a bid or 2 of what this work would actually entail ourselves, so that we have a full sense of what indeed the cost would be. And then if in turn, are able to then say, okay, if it's X, we would anticipate Capital Flight to be responsible for Y. I think that some due diligence might be beneficial here before we ultimately decide. And perhaps we do it both. Perhaps we do it if both investigate the keypad and the gate, and then we'll have both options on the table.
Yeah, obviously you can make a substitute motion. We're more than happy to put that in. Mike, the only question I would have is it really goes beyond just money. It goes beyond, is it something that's required? Right. And
Right.
I don't know that we'll find anything new out between now and then, but so you're making a motion that you would like the airport manager to get a cost of internal keypad to open that door, and also the addition of a pilot gate along with the sidewalk associated with it as a second option.
Yes.
Mark, have you got that? Okay, so.
And Capital Flight said they would be willing to fund some of it.
Well, we're just gonna get the number first,
Okay.
and then we'll negotiate whatever the deal is. So Luke's made a motion. Does anybody want to second that motion? I mean, I'd be happy to second it. It's no different than what I said. It just extends.
I'll second it also.
Yep.
Okay. All right. So Lisa, your hand's up again.
I'm fine with the motion, except I don't think it should be called a pilot gate unless it is 100% only going to be used by pilots, and it sounds like that isn't the case.
Yeah, I think that it's for, it's
What do we
really for
call it? Something
authorizing,
Mark called it a
Call something like
pedestrian.
a secured access gate. Again, you got to go back to the regulations and the standards to get the actual wording, but a
Yep.
secured access gate, something like that.
I think the idea is to distinguish a vehicle gate from a pedestrian only gate. That's simply the terminology that we're using here. We're not describing who's using, you could have a pilot or the public drive through a gate. You could have a public or, I'm sorry, now I'm jumbling this. Anyway, the point is we're just distinguishing the type of object that can go through the gate.
Yep, the mode of transportation. So
Thank you.
yeah, I mean, pedestrian is fine because it's going to be secured, and it's going to be a pedestrian. It's just going to be on foot. So
I mean, you
And-
can just say a gate for authorized individuals.
Or a secured pedestrian gate. would
Yeah.
be-
And I'm good with any of those, of this Luke's motion, of course.
Here's what I wrote. Substitute motion by Fuzard, seconded by Munson, to solicit the cost for adding a keypad to the vehicle gate and the cost to add a pedestrian gate with a sidewalk connection. That's what I wrote.
I would suggest putting secured before pedestrian.
Okay,
I don't think, yeah, I think that captures the idea. It's not just for anybody,
to add a secured pedestrian gate and sidewalk with a
Okay.
sidewalk connection,
right?
with a
Is there any
sidewalk.
more discussion about this? If not, we can call a vote to the alternate or the substitute motion. So all in favor of the substitute motion, please say aye.
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 All opposed, same sign. Okay, so the substitute motion carries. And the initial motion dies where it is. Is that correct? Okay.
Yes.
All right, so we've made some, but we've had the discussion. I think you all need to just, between now and the next time we convene on this topic, give everything some thought, maybe go to the airport, look at the use, do those things. Rich, have you got your hand up again?
Yeah, I just wanted to make a clarification. When we do have a safety seminar, often the people that are putting on the seminar may not have a key to the terminal. That doesn't, so they prop a door open. The door is monitored. It's the same as if we open that door to our terminal at 8 o'clock every morning or 7:55, and we close it around 6:30, 5:30. But if we're hosting a safety seminar, as Dave, and we do them all the time after hours, someone's here, someone's monitoring it. It isn't a propped open door to the wide open gate, simple as allowing people access to the terminal, and there are people here monitoring it. During an event, if you prop open a pilot and or secure gate, you would have to have someone there to monitor the people that would be coming in and out. Simple as that.
right, I didn't want to infer that the door was physically propped. That is correct. It's unlocked, so
Yeah.
the
But
guests can come in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to clarify to Lisa and Kevin's satisfaction what's actually going on when they have the safety seminar at the terminal here.
Okay. All right, I think we've covered that enough. Let's move on to item 4, the airport events application process. This was something that Lisa asked to be put on the agenda. So Lisa, I'll let you take it away.
Sure, thank you. I appreciate you putting this on the agenda. I looked over the materials, including the excerpts from the previous airport commission meetings related to this topic. And I guess in a nutshell, and I hope everybody has read through the materials, but in a nutshell, I would say I have to agree with former Alder Robert Burke that no form should duplicate another city form. And I absolutely don't want to see an airport event form supersede a city form. And from the excerpts, that appears to be what the original intent was to streamline the process so that certain events could bypass the city process and just be approved internally was the term. So given those two things, I'm not sure there is any purpose to a separate airport event form. I think it makes more sense for Rich to provide a statement to the Licensing and Ordinance Committee that he's reviewed the plans and is satisfied the event doesn't pose a hazard to public safety, won't unduly infringe upon airport operations, and won't violate our assurances. And on that last point, I'm wondering, I haven't seen anything to indicate that we are getting permission from the FAA or the Secretary of Transportation in advance for events that temporarily close the airport. And that is in our assurances. So I'm wondering if anybody can explain or point me to some indication that we have been complying with that.
Well, we don't close it. The only time the airport's been closed, and Rich can confirm this or not, is when there's an air show and the FAA has to sign the approval form, which we included in the packet. And so the FAA specifically at the FSDO level has approved it. I think if you look at the insurance, they're talking about closing the airport semantically, as opposed to temporarily closing it for an event such as the air show, which there's a plan has to be approved, and the local flight safety district officer FSDO has to approve it, and they normally would have people on the grounds to make sure the plans operated correctly.
Mhm.
So, so I think we're mixing apples and oranges. And I have one more thing to say, and that is the airport commission, or excuse me, the city has repeatedly asked the airport for approval of the events that goes on the airport. So we need some form. But you're absolutely correct. We should not undermine any existing form or anything related to it. It should only have the bare essentials that's required, and the airport manager should sign off on it.
Mhm.
So that's why the form is so skinny. But there could be things on there that you'd like to recommend to take off. But there should be some standardization,
Right.
even if there's only 2 questions.
Sure.
And
And if I may, maybe it's something buried in the plain language that I'm not getting, but I'm looking at several documents. One is information for airport sponsors, considering this was COVID restrictions, but it says all proposed closing of airport access, i.e. passenger and aircraft access, must be approved in advance by the FAA. I'm looking at I think this is a proposed policy that says something pretty much the same. I'm looking at assurance number 19, which I think, well, Mark, I don't know if you shared that document with everybody, but
Yeah, I
assurance
did.
number.
I gave them copies of the
Well, you gave the
assurance.
terms and conditions. I'm looking at assurance number 19, and it says any proposal to temporarily close the airport for non-aeronautical purposes must first be approved by the Secretary of Transportation. And then there is an open rulemaking that says in its background information, this is a rulemaking on a policy on the temporary closure of airports for non-aeronautical purposes. And it says each year sponsors of federally obligated airports request temporary closure of a ramp, taxiway, runway, or an entire airport for a non-aeronautical event, typically for a period of 1 to 3 days. Any such request must be approved by the FAA in advance before the event can take place. And this policy or proposed policy is for the FAA to provide guidance for how to request that type of, how to standardize the request for approval. So, and then finally, This is also temporary closing of an airport. I think this is the regulation itself. But it specifically says an airport developed or improved with federal funds may not be closed to use the airport facilities for special outdoor events such as sports car races, county fairs, parades, car testing, model airplane events, etc., without FAA approval.
Mhm.
So that's, and you know, I'm not saying we shouldn't allow events to take place. I just am, again, my purpose, I feel as an alder member of this commission, my purpose is to make sure that we're following through to the letter on our commitments to the federal government. And I feel like our form is not necessary. The Bureau of Aeronautics has its own airport special event review form that's due 90 days prior to an event. It has much more detail, is more rigorous and thorough than our form. And I would say, if anything, we should defer to the BOA and use this form to supplement the application to L&O for events.
Well, I don't think we've closed the airport for any aeronautical purposes. So, but I'm going to let Rich, as the airport manager, he had his hand up first. So Rich, I'll let you respond.
Okay, yeah, early on, again, looking at some of when this first was proposed, there was a thought by, I believe, Matt, to try to streamline the process and frankly, try to set the city or the airport up to be able to approve things without having to go through, and I may be wrong in this. That may have been how it was read, but it was clear at the beginning that that was not something that could ever possibly happen. The list, or the check, the items that we have, this event thing is essentially a checklist, and it's my review and sign off of, yes, this appears to be good. I have no problem at all going with the state version. As per closures, again, the airport has only been totally closed due to snow removal operations, which is perfectly legitimate, and the air show, which had prior federal approval and quite a large federal FAA presence on board while we were doing it. Now, it would be useful because we have closed the grass runway on occasion for both aeronautical events, certainly, but for the cruise in. And if we need to, if we've missed something, we're going to, obviously, it's complete and total transparency, and we're going to go in and do it. If we didn't do it right last year, we'll do it right this year. Simple enough. As per passengers restrictions, we don't have scheduled passenger service at this airport. I think you're maybe misreading the scope of that initial, but I'd have to look at the regulation specifically.
We don't have any TSA guidelines. We're not controlled by the TSA.
Exactly. So the COVID restrictions really didn't apply to any, well, if it was for passenger service, that's not something that we restricted out here. We just followed the regulations as were set out. So I think in large, we're in compliance. I think totally. And if there was an inadvertent miss of permission for the only non-aviation event that we've had in the last decade, I believe, we can fix that. Or move forward with corrective action. But frankly, closing a grass runway for half a day is not. That's done all over the state for an awful lot of events, including our fly-in pancake breakfast, which is an aeronautical event. So,
well, that's not closing the airport. First,
that's not closing the airport. It's closing a section of the
closing off. So
right.
the airport is still usable.
Absolutely.
So, and I think, you know, in your right that there was a discussion about having a one form with the airport that would basically undermine the rest of the city, and I pretty much said we're not going to do that, because why would we want to do something that's already done. But
Yeah.
at the same time, LNO continues to ask us for approval, right? And so there needs to be something that we can follow up on. I'm gonna let a couple of these other people talk. Kevin, you got your hand up.
Yeah, so as far as I know, we've never closed the airport for non-aeronautical reasons.
No.
And it would come under temporary flight restrictions, and depending on whether it's a Part 91 airport or a Part 121 airport, they use two different forms. Part 121 is scheduled airline service, Part 91 is our kind of airport. So anytime we've had a big event where we've had to implement a temporary flight restriction, that has gone through the FAA. It has to, even the grass runway, that has to go through the FAA, because you need to put out a notice to airmen not to land on the runway when the pilot's up there executing low-level aerobatics. So and again, it's all defined in the standards. It's maybe another thing I can talk about in the standards and the FAR and the AIM and then the advisory circulars. There's specific requirements, but each one of these events, we've had the FAA approval. And then it's up to the FAA to decide, hey, you fill out this form or you fill out that form. What we want to know is, have those forms been filled out? So as we move forward, that's one thing the commissions did. Not that we filled out the forms, but have they been completed? That's it.
Okay, David, you got comments you'd like to make?
Yeah, so looking back historically, to refresh those new to the commission, and maybe we need to restate it. So the form that the Airport Commission has, let's call it a checklist. And the reason being is it was really just a guidance mechanism. So, what we've learned is, through these kind of events as a commission, just to ask some questions of due diligence. That's really what it boils down to. So like when we have the pancake breakfast, how many volunteers are there? Where are they going to be stationed? What are they going to be doing? Okay, there's people out directing some, parking and traffic, and there's people, there are people at the pedestrian gates in various areas assisting everybody. There's people out on the tarmac, where cones are set up, just helping movement of all the guests and people out at the airport. And that was really the intent of this form. So it wasn't a mechanism for, in my mind, approval or disapproval of an event at the airport. It was just a checklist. So the commission, in conjunction with airport management and the people coming to the city requesting the event, we could say, as a commission, we looked it over and it's sound. So we're not saying, we're not then, making a decision beyond that. So, if we don't want to have a checklist, we don't want to have a checklist, but I guess it was just a handy tool.
If it helps everybody, at the next meeting that we have, we certainly could invite a representative of the Bureau of Aeronautics and a rep for FSDO, which is the FAA. And, we can, if it provides comfort, ask them the question. I'm pretty comfortable. I know all the answers to this. Aviation is very, very complicated. And so you can't just look at one document. You really got to look at 2 or 3 documents and then take the context of where the regulations come from. And sometimes it's not as obvious as what it looks like. But, if it'll provide comfort, we just invite the people to come and you can ask the questions directly. So Lisa, you have your hand up again.
Yeah, well, and like I said, I'm not looking at just one document. I'm looking at several, including the airport compliance manual that has an effective date of November 22nd of last year. And it says that, again, non-aeronautical events, perhaps the pancake breakfast. Let's not even talk about that. Let's talk about the two that came before the airport commission last month. It says pretty clearly that it shouldn't be closed, even temporarily, any part of the airport without FAA approval. And it says this has been the FAA policy since 1961. So, and that's just one document. But I also
But
wonder,
it hasn't. But Lisa,
excuse
do you
me,
have evidence that it was closed? I mean, you're acting like it's
Well,
closed. It
I-
hasn't been closed.
I'm not acting in any way, Mr. Chair. I'm looking at the documents, the form that was submitted to us for our November meeting, and it says, will the airport or runway need to be shut down? Yes, for both events. So, again, maybe I'm hindered by looking at the plain language
Yeah,
of what's come before us, but that is what it says. It sounds like it's a temporary closure.
yes.
Rock the Ramp and Capital and Cruise In, as admirable and well-intentioned as they may be, sound like they may be non-aeronautical events under these guidelines. And all I'm asking is, are we doing our due diligence and making sure that we have, to go back to Dave's comment about a checklist, have we checked the box that says we have gotten the FAA's approval under assurance number 19 to go forward with this activity? I imagine we will get that approval, but it sounds like we should be getting it. And when Brian is back, I'll work with him to run this by the city attorney and make sure we are following through, complying with all the assurances.
Yeah, I think you'll find out that we are not closing them for we are not closing the airport, first of all. And the purpose is that are aeronautical in nature. But I think if you want to talk to Brian and the city attorney about it, if that gives you comfort, that's, I think, what you ought to be doing. So.
Well, and again, I'll just go back to your form that asks, will it be shut down? And that question right there, maybe it just needs to be phrased differently.
It needs to be rewritten. That was probably an oversimplification. So the question should be, is the airport to be closed for non-aeronautical purposes? Which is really what 19 of the assurances says. Right, so that language then dovetails back into the assurances. And I'm more than happy to make that change to the form. It's obvious that it's oversimplified, but I'm more than happy to have the FAA. I'm more than happy to have the BOA attend the next session that we've got. If it provides you some comfort, or you can go with Brian and the city attorney if you wanted to go down that route, or both. But I'm pretty comfortable with it. And but more importantly, I guess you need to be comfortable with it. So
A
Well-
clarifying question for the minutes, just so I think I'm starting to understand Lisa's question better. So are you saying, Lisa, that are you concerned about any portion of the airport being closed? Or like in the case of Rock the Ramp, when there's an air show, there is an actual closure that the FAA has to approve?
I'm saying that our assurances make it very clear that for any temporary closure of all or part of the airport, we need FAA approval in advance. And I've seen two of our own internal forms indicate, yes, there will be a closure of part of the airport. To me, those two things together mean we should be getting FAA, actually the approval of the Secretary of Transportation is what it says.
yeah, that's only assumes it's for
And I'm just trying to make
non-aeronautical
sure-
purposes.
I'm trying to make sure we're doing our due diligence, since we all cite the assurances as, we're following everything to the letter. I just want to make sure that's the case. And if we need to be getting the FAA's approval, we need to start acting on that sooner rather than later.
Followed by pound.
Yeah, I think that the key is you have to add to the closure non-aeronautical purposes. So I don't know where we leave it now, but would you like me to invite the FAA and the BOA to the next meeting that we have?
Yes, and I'd like them to speak specifically to this policy on the temporary closure of airports for non-aeronautical purposes. And it may be that we need clarification of what that definition, non-aeronautical, means. Like I said, my read of the airport compliance manual sounds pretty clear. County fairs, parades, car testing, that sports car races, those are things that strike me as similar to Rock the Ramp and the cruise in. And according to this document, the airport compliance manual, it sounds like we should be getting approval and should have been getting approval for these things since 1961.
Okay, well, certainly that's your interpretation. I'm pretty comfortable that we're in the clear, but I will invite the BOA and the FAA, FSDO, to the next meeting, and then, we could, let's bring some clarity here. Okay? If there's nothing else with that one, we have one last item before my PC runs out of power here. And that's the Kevin Munson asked if maybe there could be a resource document that would benefit the various commissioners. And so he put one together. And Kevin, if you'd like to go through it real quick.
I'll just go through it really quick. I'm really happy to do this. I've been trying to get this on the agenda for a few years now. And so we know that the aviation is very, very complex. It's right up there. It's regulated as heavily as the nuclear industry, the food and drug, which I was, heavily involved with as a compliance officer for our company. And, and along with those heavily regulated industries, the agencies that oversee these aren't necessarily on site every day, monitoring as they would with, say, the USDA with meats and poultry and all that. It's, for the most part, self-regulated, and it's self-regulated by what we call the 10,000 hour rule. In other words, if you have 10,000 hours of education, experience, and training, you're probably going to do pretty well in that topic. If not, you're going to have to rely heavily on the resources that are out there. And that's where a lot of us are. And I've seen, since I've been on the commission for several years, just like today, we had at least a half a dozen instances where there's a regulation or a guidance document or a standard or something like that that explains exactly what our questions are. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of research. It takes because, like John said, and I think Lisa's starting to see now, there's a lot of different documents. There may be 10 different or 20 different documents for one issue, like what is, a temporary closure of an airport, what's considered aeronautical use and what's not considered, and depending on the type of airport, you have to fill out a different form, et cetera, et cetera. So everything that we do in aviation, everything that we do is there's a document out there that tells us exactly how to do it. We don't think or guess on our own what we think we should do. We don't prop a door open, or a gate or anything like that. We follow these regulations. So with all of that said, what I'd like to do is quickly go through some of the resources that are available to us. And the first one is this FAA Pilot's Handbook of Aeronautical Knowledge and the Flight Training Handbook. Those are both online on the FAA website. They're free and all that. We have, I brought a few other books in our industry. We have private companies that write textbooks, and it's always good for any subject that you want to become, to have experience in and want to have some knowledge in, to get a good textbook and read it, because not only does it have a lot of information in it, there's a lot of references where you can dive deeper. So any subject, always find a good textbook. This is a good one, but the FAA has their Flight Training Handbook and their Handbook of Aeronautical Knowledge on the FAA website. The second, and like I said, I'm going to go through this pretty fast. because this will be available to everyone. You can cut and paste these links. The second thing that's very, very important to the commission, to somewhat to the airport users, and especially the communities, our leadership out there, is the Wisconsin Airport Land Use Guidebook. And this tells you pretty much everything that you need to know to ensure compatible land use around airports, so we don't get into, these issues with noise or whatever, lead or whatever. So it says the Airport Land Use Guidebook is designed to help communities and airports work cooperatively to plan and establish compatible land use around airports and work towards mitigating existing incompatible conditions. So it takes a lot of the guesswork out, and it takes a lot of the politics out. Here's what we should be doing. Doesn't mean we're going to do it, but here's a reference. The third resource, which is what we as pilots, I have it up on my other computer here. We as pilots use quite frequently, is the FAR AIM, and that's the Federal Aviation Regulations and the Airman's Information Manual. It's on the FAA website, and you can access it for free. But here's what the book looks like. I like this because it has my airplane on the front of it, or one like it. But again, here it is. This is a good reference book that we as pilots use, and it's over 1,000 pages. Just one book, 1,000 pages. So you can see how complicated all this aviation stuff is. And we have a general rule in aviation: for every hour we fly, we study for 4 hours. Not everybody does that, but those that are professional pilots do that. We spend a lot of time, much more time on the regulations, rules, and all that than we actually do in the air. Of course, the Federal Aviation Regulations, the FARs, are rules prescribed by the FAA governing all aviation activities in the United States. The Aeronautical Information Manual, that's the AIM, that's the other half of this book, is the FAA's official guide to basic flight information and air traffic control procedures. A lot of people have asked, a lot of people come to these meetings, what are these ATC procedures? What is a traffic pattern? Why are these planes flying over our house? Well, this book pretty much goes into a lot of detail on that. The AIM contains basic aeronautical knowledge information required to fly in the United States National Airspace System. The AIM also contains items of interest to pilots concerning health and medical facts, factors affecting flight safety, and information on safety, accident, and hazard reporting. So the FAR AIM, I spend a lot of time in these books, lots and lots of time, and I have for the last 40 some years. The biggest, probably the best resource we have are these FAA advisory circular programs. They're de facto documents. They reference regulations, but also they are advisory circulars, but they're considered by the FAA to be best practices. So if you do something that's contrary to the advisory circular, you have to be able to scientifically justify it, and it needs to be, as thorough and conservative as the advisory circular. 99% of the time, you just do what the advisory circular say. I mean, even the master planning process, there's an advisory circular for that. And the FAA is very particular. This is the way you do a master plan. And if you don't do it this way, we're going to keep kicking it back to you until you do it this way. So a lot of questions. Well, I've heard, when we do this planning, we go behind closed doors and we kind of come to an agreement. And the master planning process, that's really not an option, especially when it comes to the causal models and the mathematical models for forecasting and inventories and other mathematical requirements of that. So there's an advisory circular for that. Now, there's 768 of these advisory circulars. Some of them are more than 700 or 800 pages. So we're talking hundreds of thousands of pages of information on airport operations and master planning and flight operations at airports and even how you endorse the student logbooks. As a flight instructor, there were several just for flight instructors. Two of particular interest are the non-towered airport flight operations and airport design. I think that airport design is something like 1,200 pages or something. And good luck getting through that. But these are good references. And you're not going to be expected to go through and read all these and study it. You just need to know where to go to get this information. As you know, as we found out with making sure the waivers are completed, you know, the FAA waivers for any temporary flight restrictions at airports, if for no other reasons, for the notice to airmen to tell them, hey, this runway is closed, you know, for an hour or 2 hours or something, which kind of segues into the next number 5, which is the FAA chart supplements. These were formerly known as the airport facility directories. And these are chart supplements. They contain data on public and joint use airports, seaplane bases, heliports. They have airport sketches, VFR airport sketches, nav aids, which are, you know, the radio communications and the navigation radio frequencies that you use to come in and out of the airport, weather data, airspace, these notice to airmen, special notices like the airport shut down for maintenance, and things like that, operational procedures. So there's 7 of these volumes, and they cover the United States, Puerto Rico, and the Virgin Islands. And the last thing is there was a lot of discussion out there that there's no TSA guidance for general aviation airports, and I included a link. It's 56 pages on the security around GA airports specific. You have to remember that this 9/11 really started with general aviation airports and flight training. So the TSA and Homeland Security and all that made sure that they put out advisory and guideline documents to ensure that the GA airports were also secure. And again, when all else fails, just go to the FAA website. You'll probably find information. There's a lot here, but these are pretty much the documents that I use when I'm not sure about something, or we have something that we're going to talk about, we need to study and have a discussion on. So I can read up on it and get it fresh in my mind what the requirements are and the current requirements, because these regulations and guidances and standards quite frequently change, just like they do with the nuclear industry and the Food and Drug Administration and other heavily regulated industries. The one last thing that I forgot to say is the FAA, along with the FDA and the nuclear industry and all that, are considered strict liability endeavors. In other words, the decisions you made are expected to be correct. If not, you can't say I didn't know. I mean, they don't accept absence of malice. You're still liable for making the wrong decision, if you will. It's kind of like the IRS. You don't pay your taxes because you wrote your cat off or your dog off. The IRS, they don't care. They go, fine. You still owe the taxes and you owe the penalties and the interest. And it's very much like that with the FAA and other heavily regulated industries. Strict liability applies. That's it. I just wanted to throw these references out there, and how complicated things are. And just remember, if there's something that we're talking about and we're not sure what the answer is, I can almost promise you there's either a law, a statute, there's a regulation, or there's some sort of standard or guidance that will tell us exactly how we need to do it. That's it.
Yeah, so when somebody asks us a question, about, can we have a gate? Is there a limited number? Are there engineering specifications? Usually between meetings, we'll go look it all up and try to find out the details, and then share the details with the airport commission as best we can. And, temporary closures as there's probably an airport, the advisory circulars are expansions of things that are written somewhere else. So whenever it's unclear, they produce an airport circular and it details them more. So there's probably something on what is a temporary closure. So, but we'll get the FAA and the BOA and we'll invite them in any event. for that. So thank you, Kevin.
You're welcome. Thanks for giving me a few minutes to talk about these.
And not a problem. And I think everybody should just go take a look at them. I mean, you don't have to memorize them, but just know where to find things should you decide you need it. And that's good. So, and I also, Brian Shaw asked at one time about Lisa cited the assurances in section 19. And Brian Shaw had asked for it, and I had that included in the packet this month, so that you guys can see the actual assurances that were signed and take a look at the various sections. So I think has everything there. So again, thank you, Kevin.
Yeah, and thank you for including that.
Yeah, not a problem. So future events and agenda items, does anybody have anything top of mind other than we're going to invite the FISDO, and we're going to invite the BOA to talk about closures, I guess, if that's the concern. And right now, my plan is not to have a January meeting. We have not had a January meeting for ever. Mostly because people are on vacations and they take off between Christmas and New Year's Eve and all of that. So unless there's something important come up, I'm not planning on having one. If there is something that's important comes up, we certainly will. But we have to have enough content, I think, to make it worth people's while. And with that, I'd like to make a motion that we adjourn.
I'll second.
Okay, so we have a first and second on adjournment. Any discussion? All in favor of adjourning, please say aye.
Hi.
Aye.
Pose same sign. Okay, we're officially adjourned for the Airport Commission. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Bye all.
Cheers. Bye-bye.